So much to Tammy, Crystal, and Kendra for helping us to get this production done under the National Child Passenger Safety Board. I'm going to be talking about under the radar, kids with impaired drivers, unprotected occupants. Next, please. My name is Stephanie Tombrello, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child passenger safety instructor. In fact, my instructor number is 10061. I was one of 15 volunteers who started SafetyBeltSafe USA in 1980, but I had been interested in child passenger safety since 1970 and doing volunteer efforts. I served as executive director of SafetyBeltSafe from 1982 to 2021. But for today's event, the most important memberships are with the California State Highway Safety Plan Committee's Impaired Driver and Occupant Protection. And I want to thank the Impaired Driver Committee for allowing me to present this issue to them in 2018 and becoming enthusiastic about it. Next, please. Today, I hope to give you an understanding of the problem and why we must care. I'll review some statistics and risks, give you some information about research, and go over 4 approaches to resolution. Probably the most important primary step is educating and alerting professionals, including child passenger safety technicians, but many others who work with families. We want to engage the public and advocate for applying and improving laws. Another important component is empowering children to buckle up through their education. That is a defense for children who have to ride with impaired drivers, as you will see. And then I want to help you find some resources, especially from SafetyBeltSafe USA. And again, I want to thank Denise Donaldson of Safe Ride News for helping me to compact this information for 40 minutes of discussion. Next. So first we have some national data. Next, please. So these data are taken from Traffic Facts Children from NHTSA, and they're from 2021. We lost 1,184 children who died in crashes that year. 24.9%, or 294, died in an impaired driver crash. And of these children 15 and under, 55% were riding with the impaired driver. And you can see from the graphic that they are the largest group. Next, please. This is also from Traffic Facts, and it is also 2021. Nationwide, deceased children were unrestrained when the driver had no alcohol, 38%, when the driver was alcohol impaired, 43%. And the thing that is striking about this to me is that how close these statistics are in 2021. In the past, there had been a bigger gap when the driver was alcohol impaired, as you will see. Next. MAD estimates that drunk driving trips with child passengers every year are between 46 and 102 million. The percentage of convicted DUI offenders who continue to drive on a suspended license between 50% and 75%. Significant reductions were seen between 1982 and 1997, but progress on DUI fatality reduction has stalled since then, according to research by Thomas et al. Next, please. Now, here are some snapshots of the cases that have come to our attention. Snapshot number 1, the headline is, Family Pleads for Seatbelt Safety After Deadly Crash Kills 5 Off the I-5 in French Camp, which is in San Joaquin County, California. Brenda Williams, Lorinda Jones' cousin, told CBS 13 that her cousin, her boyfriend Nathaniel Clifton, and 2 of their children died in the crash and pleaded for the use of safety belts and safety seats. And you can see a rather sad picture of the crash scene, a true tragedy. And the CHP was on the scene. Next, please. Stockton officer of the CHP, Reuben Jones, said the 2 children and 3 adults were killed in the crash. And he says that impaired driving is likely a factor and that the tragedy was completely preventable. It occurred March 12th, as I said, in San Joaquin County. The children were not in safety seats. Speed was involved and the likely impairment. The children and 1 adult in the back seat were not wearing seat belts, the CHP said definitively. What we learned later, a 10-year-old boy who was not on the trip was left an orphan. Snapshot number 2. This occurred in Southern California. 911 received a call from a scared 12-year-old boy whose dad, who was impaired, picked him up and started heading for Las Vegas, Nevada. The harrowing situation ended when 911 operators managed to get the boy to wave from the car so he could be rescued, because, of course, the boy didn't know his license plate number. In the hour it took to find him, that vehicle was driven from Los Angeles County to San Bernardino County on freeways. And of course, that was a risk to many other people as well. The father was arrested and charged with DUI and child endangerment. But how many children in like circumstances can phone 911 to find rescue? This was reported on television. Snapshot number 3. A school bus driver from New Jersey who was arrested after hitting a parked car while driving 42 school kids to a park. The driver also left the scene, obviously frightened. Now apprehended, he faces 42 counts of child endangerment, each possibly requiring 10 years in prison. DUI with kids on board is more common than most people realize. Next. Snapshot number 4 also happened in California, and it points out that alcohol is not the only form of impairment. Additionally, the effect of legalizing cannabis use is not yet known, and I know that there are research projects going on to see how to measure that impact. This case occurred in Lancaster in Los Angeles County. A 4-year-old was ejected and killed at 3 a.m. His father had cannabis, a meth pipe, and alcohol in the car. He crossed to the wrong side, hit an ambulance. But what are the common features? The child was unrestrained and the father survived. And most Americans perceive that after consuming cannabis, they are in a less risky state to drive than after driving alcohol. A study by Eduardo Romano et al. A local issue for CPSTs is DUI in children. Here, over 5 years in San Joaquin County, Safe Kids saw among children under 8 years old riding with no restraints, 65 injured and 3 deaths, reported by Rachel Zerbo, the Safe Kids coordinator in San Joaquin. Next, please. In Los Angeles County, you can see the numbers. These are substance-involved crash victims by age range in 2020, injuries and fatalities. Under 1 is just 1, but at 1 to 4, we see 66 cases. At 5 to 9, 85, almost as many as 10 to 13 with 89. So in Los Angeles County alone, 241 children 13 and under were involved in impaired driver crashes. Next, please. What does the research reveal? So an early investigator in this issue was pediatrician Kieran Quinlan while he was on a fellowship at the CDC. He published a paper in 2000 and another in 2014. His research revealed that the majority of children killed in impaired driver crashes were with the impaired driver. And you can see a clipping that I cut from the newspaper from the front page of the LA Times in 2020 about his research. However, I did not put a link between that and child passenger safety until about 2017, when I was fortunate enough to meet a man from the DMV in California who invited me to do a presentation in 2018 for the State Highway Safety Plan Committee Impaired Driver. They were very gracious, and I joined the committee. We'll tell you more about that as we go. But there are many people who are in this field who have no idea about this issue. For example, Carrie Chosmer, who many of you may know from her work at Safe Kids and who is now at the Governor's Highway Safety Association, told me that she had no idea about this when we were discussing it. Since then, she has been kind enough to post in LinkedIn her conviction that this is a part of child passenger safety and that it needs to be worked on. Next, please. So, what is the situation for children? Kids cannot say, friends, ask friends not to drive drunk, and they can't get out of the car on their own. If an adult tells them to get into the car, they have to do it. Next, please. Karen Quinlan with Schultz and Rudd did a paper for pediatrics in 2014. They showed that in the cars in which children died, 71% of the drivers lived, meaning the majority of these crashes were survivable. The BACs ranged from 0.08 to 0.59 with a median of 0.15. Driver characteristics compared with non-drinking drivers in fatal crashes: male with a DUI conviction within 3 years, no valid driver's license, and unrestrained themselves. But remember, they have the airbag in most cars. However, women comprise over a third of impaired drivers in crashes killing children. They abuse prescription medications at a much higher rate when they're young compared with young men. And the crash statistics are typically evening or night and single vehicle. So this is the background of the situation. Next. I think this graph is extremely meaningful, and it comes from that paper. If you notice, there are white, tan, and dark gray bars. The white are the non-drinking drivers. The tan are the BAC between 0.01 and 0.07, which is a legal limit, except in Utah, which instituted 0.05. And as an aside, they did not do a massive campaign about it. They announced the law. They saw a reduction in impaired drivers. Now, the dark gray bar, these are the children riding with drivers with a BAC of 0.08 or above. Now, you can see a progression. If you look at the left, you'll see those under 5, and you can see the restraint use on the side. It's over 60% for those who are not drinking, and it falls for those who are. But you can also notice that as the child gets older, 5 to 9 and then 10 to 14, restraint use goes down in each category, and it gets really low as the alcohol goes up and the child's age goes up. So that's an important correlation to know about. Next. So there are a bit of good news. Over the 10-year period, overall child passenger safety deaths and alcohol-related child passenger safety deaths, or passenger deaths, declined 44% and 41% respectively. But since 2020, we all know deaths in traffic are going up. Motor vehicle occupant deaths had been down 30%, now are up 18%. And all of us, I know, are working to get this on a downward trend. Next, please. So some more research. By serving on the State Highway Safety Plan Impaired Driver Committee, I came to know Friedner Whitman, PhD, who has done a lot of research on where people drink. And in 2011, he looked at the data in Santa Clara County in California as to where the point of last drink was before the person went to drive. And as you can see, the bar for the person's own home is at the very top. And in addition, number 3 is other homes. And that means that you want to think about who's at home. And that's where the children are. So that's their risk situation. Next. Then he looked in 2 different groups, what they call self-managed, meaning a personal situation in which the driver was in control, and then other locations. And you will see that in both categories, home is number 1. When they were self-managed, it was their own home. When it was host-managed, it was someone else's home. And you can see that that's the top percentage in each category. Next. So what are we going to do to take action on this? Well, there's some technological solutions, and what's being done now. You can see a picture of an interlock, because if you, like I am, not involved directly in working with those who use alcohol and drive, you may not have seen it. This was usually would be required by a judicial agency. So about 28% of drinking drivers have them, but the long-term effectiveness after they stop having it has not been demonstrated. Generally, first-time offenders do not reoffend, so interlock data may not relate to them. That doesn't mean they don't drink and drive, of course, because of what we understand of how many trips are not caught by law enforcement. Interlocks do not address driving under the influence of drugs. This is a continuing issue in impaired driving in combination with alcohol, separately, and a wide range of drugs. And so this is being investigated, but it is not solved by an interlock situation. Next, please. Then there are legal solutions. Leandra's law in New York could be a national model for a DUI child endangerment law. It's a comprehensive law enacted in New York in 2009. It is a felony to drive drunk with child passenger in the car. Next, please. It has key provisions. First-time offenders may be charged with a Class E felony, which is up to 4 years in prison. A BAC of 0.08 or greater, automatic suspensions of the license pending prosecution. And I think that's an important component, although, as I have reported, many people drive with a suspended license, but it will block some people. All drivers convicted of a misdemeanor or felony DWI, regardless of whether a child is in the vehicle, must install and maintain ignition interlocks for at least 6 months, in addition to any prison term. Causing the death of a child through DUI is a Class B felony, up to 25 years in prison. Causing injury, Class C, up to 15 years in prison. Now, those might be deterrents, except most parents, I think, don't really admit to themselves that they're driving impaired with their children. and so they may not pay attention to that part of the law. Next, please. 42 of the 51 U.S. states and District of Columbia specifically address DUI child endangerment. They either have enhanced penalties or separate offenses in their statutes. But penalties are often reduced in plea deals. Research finds no significant relationship in the strength of the DUI child endangerment laws and the number of child fatalities and DUI crashes. Thomas et al. In 2014. And 50 to 75% of convicted drunk drivers continue to drive on a suspended license, according to Peck et al. In 1995. Now, I want to mention that we're very fortunate that Tara Kelly Baker is now the chief of Impaired Driving Division, NPD-100, Research and Program Development at NHTSA. And I had the opportunity to meet her at a conference last week, and she is doing a lot of research, as I knew, on this issue, and tells me that she has new research coming out, and that this is an area in which she has a strong passion. So we can hope for some leadership from that aspect of NHTSA, and my hope is that on the occupant protection side, we'll see more stress on this risk to children riding generally unrestrained with an impaired driver. Next, please. So there's a 2021 study that shows that only 10% charged with DUI felony and 11% with DUI misdemeanor also got the child endangerment charge. So perhaps not charging that component produces a statistical lack of effect on DUI-related child deaths. But here's an example of where working with DAs and lawyers in general would be a helpful thing to get them aware that this is a problem and that something needs to be done in terms of protecting children in the home if there is a person charged with a felony or a misdemeanor DUI. Next, please. I've emblazoned this, that many professionals working with families simply do not realize that adults the age of parents cause child deaths by driving impaired with a child in the vehicle. It would help to strengthen the DUI laws to standards similar to New York, enforce these laws robustly, charge them properly, and prosecute them effectively. But education is so important, and that includes judicial education programs to bring the attention of families and professionals to this ongoing problem. Next, please. So what can we do? You can refer the family to Child Protective Services and then have them investigated thoroughly. However, if the social workers are not aware that children are often involved as passengers in the vehicles with impaired drivers in their family, they may not look into this aspect or work on finding a way to stop this within the family circle. You can educate to encourage courts to support divorced and separated parents in making safe transport arrangements. One of the things that comes up is that a parent comes to visit the child and the other parent realizes that this parent is impaired from long contact between them. Now the arrangement often doesn't have a clause about this, and the parent who sees the problem may be forced to turn the child over or get some kind of a problem for not doing so. So this needs to be in these arrangements. And again, that's encouraging education of the professionals involved. Teaching children the habit of buckling up independently as early as possible is really important for a number of reasons, which I'll mention later, but this also is a protection. And helping the local media to report these cases and highlight the general issue would be helpful for the general public, because most people believe that the impaired driver who kills a child comes out of the dusk and suddenly hits the car with the child in it. And they do not realize that the majority of those children are riding with the impaired driver. Next, please. So Dr. Whitman did some research comparing the place of last drink in 2000 and 2017, and this was presented at a symposium in Alameda County in California in 2019. Next, please. So here you see a 10-year span in Kern County in California in the place of last drink. And I've highlighted the fact that someone else's home or the person's own home ended up essentially 53 and 52% of the cases. So you have a lot of other locations, but where is the main location? In the 2017 survey, when they broke it out, someone else's home, but 19% were in the person's own home. Next, please. Now, because this was a study to try to change how programs to combat this were done, you'll see a number of categories here, but I've highlighted the ones where we might have more impact. Yes, if you're working with impaired drivers, self-hosting is an important thing to work on. And of course, they work with commercial hosts all the time. But social hosts, talking about the general public and encouraging friends to either set a moderate drinking expectation or less, controlling the setting and not letting alcohol dominate an occasion are all important, especially if there's a risk of someone who's struggling with impaired driving. And then they talk about blending voluntary, persuasive, and mandatory unilateral actions together at the community level. And I want to emphasize how each community can work on that. Next, please. Local control, they talk about that various things that local agencies can do to improve it. And when they talk about organized campaigns, they're talking about community projects and coalitions for outreach, working with the alcohol and other drug county agencies that are trying to prevent this problem, and how they can help through the strategic prevention framework planning. And I would add a focus on children at risk, because I think often that group is left out. State agencies and institutional support is very crucial, and I wanted to highlight the ones that we generally work with as child passenger safety technicians and instructors. The Department of Public Health, the DMV, possibly serving on the state highway safety plan committees, and the Office of Traffic Safety, which may be named differently in your state, but which is the agency that interacts between NHTSA and local agencies, and from which many receive funding. All of them can benefit from adding children to the campaign. Next, please. Now, here are some ideas that we have attempted to get into actions on this issue at SafetyBeltSafe USA. Next. So what do we find? So the first thing is that I have been presenting this issue to professionals, mostly in child passenger safety, but also nurse practitioners. And occasionally I will mention it to a parent. Fervent thanks for raising the issue, because I was that child. And these are professionals in traffic safety coming up to me voluntarily and sometimes quite emotional. They will recall vividly the feelings that were engendered, how they feared the loss of their parent to law enforcement. For example, the parent might have a minor collision, law enforcement would come, the child would worry that the parent would be taken away and lost. Anxiety about the kinds of driving that they experienced, which lasted a lifetime, still engendering some feelings of discomfort. And they remember the plans they made to shield their younger siblings. For example, by saying, I'll care for the children, you just go. I've had parents, or I've had adults tell me that they literally thought they would die in the car. Other professionals have said, I don't know. I have never heard. I didn't know this was a frequent occurrence. And, I think that's a very common experience. So if you feel that this is news to you or will be news to your colleagues, that's a normal reaction. And the public actually will express horror that it could be happening. And I have to just give a quick anecdote. I had a car that was broken down and had to be taken to the dealership. Man from AAA came, big, huge truck. We started off. Somehow this issue came up in conversation. The man actually stopped the truck, looked at me and said, that can't be true. He was horrified. So that's just one example, and he's someone who's in traffic quite a bit. Next, please. Now, here are some materials that you might consider using. We have a flyer. It's just one page. It's called Under the Radar. It's number 1 on our list of resources. If you go to carseat.org/SBS handouts and resources, at the top, you'll see there's a list. And we have a lot of materials, so we put numbers on them so we can communicate more quickly. So number 1 is this, and you'll see this sort of blurry picture. And I wanted to note what that is. Apparently, a woman got into her car with another adult woman and 3 children and tried to get out of the parking lot to drive on Los Angeles County streets. She hit a parked car. A deputy sheriff was dealing with another issue not very far away, heard the crash and came over, and that's how it was revealed. Just think about her getting onto the surface streets and the freeways in that condition, and that she had a crash in a parking lot. So the flyer summarizes statistics and information about this issue as something you can use as a reference. If you go to carseat.org, you can also go down to the bottom of the homepage and find our YouTube channel. There we have a series of little vignettes meant to address some of the issues we have in our handouts that are often not commonly known to parents and others. And you are welcome to link to DUI is Deadly or look at some of the others that might be helpful to you. Next, please. So I mentioned my gratitude to being able to serve on the California Strategic Highway Safety Plan Alcohol and Drug Impaired Driving Challenge Committee. And through that, I encountered the head of a public relations firm and the person from the DMV whom I'd met at a conference and who had invited me to come and give the presentation in 2018. We were able to get an action item to try to get digital posters into the centralized rotation of public awareness messages offered at 170 Department of Motor Vehicle offices statewide, as they said to me, from Alturas to Yuba City. But these are these offices with the highest number of persons coming through, and they have this rotation. So we worked together and developed these posters. There are actually 6 of them because each one is in English and Spanish. My job was to make sure that the pictures were accurate, and that was a really hard job. I went to Getty Images as they told me to do and discovered why so much public information has the wrong picture. We see incorrect information, either foreign seats, seats that are not installed properly, children going the wrong direction, and even some illegal situations. So I was very fortunate that a safety seat manufacturer donated some pictures, and we were able to use those because I could not find accurate pictures through the typical way that people in public relations do. And I think that's an important thing to know, and that's a group to educate as well. Now you'll see that the message is 0 alcohol, 0 drugs, and 0 distractions. And some people have said, well, why does it say when my kids are in the car? Of course, you shouldn't do this under any circumstance. But what we're trying to do is to let people know that this happens with kids in the car. It's the beginning of getting this message widely out. And the ones that are being shown are the first 2 to the left in English and Spanish. The original idea was to have 6 months of exposure. And just 2 months ago, I learned that the DMV had decided to extend this to January 2024, for which we are very appreciative. And I also want to thank American Honda for funding a lot of the effort in this area. Next, please. Child-focused training is really important. I know that often you reach out to Head Start and other early childhood education programs and elementary schools. What we have done is develop Boosters Are for Big Kids. These curricula are both classroom and in-car experiences. We have a curriculum for K through 3 and another for 4-5. And that came about because we were doing a television spot with a mother with twins who were non-identical. And in the conversation, what we were doing was showing how to do the 5-step test. And it was clear that one of the twins didn't pass. And the mother said to me, well, they're in the 4th grade. They wouldn't get exposure to the program that you're doing because you do K through 3. So that led us to have the second component. We try to encourage excitement about being buckled up correctly. By testing all the children in the car at the same time, they all fail the safety belt readiness test together, and they all try a booster together. So the teacher brings them out, and one by one, the children try the 5-step test with a belt, and then when they fail, they move over to the booster and see how it fits. So we also teach that the back seat is the best seat. And who rides in back? Celebrities ride in the back seat. So if we can do things to make children enthusiastic about understanding why and how to buckle up correctly, that also builds into protecting those children riding with impaired drivers who may not be restrained by the driver's actions. Next, please. Empower kids to protect themselves. Experiential learning by taking the 5-step test gives them the tools to intervene on their own behalf if they're in a vehicle and not buckled up with the help of an adult. And it is also the first step in taking responsibility for their bodies. We all know as parents, when you send children off to school, there's a period of time when they're not under your supervision, and the teacher has a lot to do to keep track of all the children and in the experiences before and after school. We all know that at some point one has to talk about sex and drugs and alcohol and how children should react to people trying to either get them to ingest things or trying to touch their bodies. These are all rather hard to discuss. But teaching kids to take responsibility for their bodies in the car is much easier and less fraught, and it's the first step to self-responsibility. And I think that that's a valuable byproduct. Next. So these are some of examples of experiential learning. I found a reference to our 5-step test in a research paper by Perrott et al. In 2022. And by going back through that, I realized that Australia has been using our 5-step test in education for 10 years. And I've made contact with folks in Australia, and they have reached out to me because now their equivalent of Safe Kids is in some of the states are trying to change their law so that it will have the 5-step test in it. You can see the 5-step test in these drawings. We actually created it in 2001 as we were working on developing Boosters Are for Big Kids and looking at what was reality in the schools and what we might do to help people understand. The other aspect of this is that you can get these flyers. As I mentioned, we have numbers. So number 630 and 630S in Spanish. And for California, we have ones with the California law, but you might be able to put in your law with a discussion with us. In any case, the curricula are available as well. Next, please. Start with your colleagues. Share what you've learned. See if others were aware. And don't be surprised if they're not. Request a webinar from us at SafetyBeltSafe USA on the research findings that support this inclusion, or refer to technicians to this webinar. Reach out to healthcare, education, law enforcement, social service agencies, athletic team groups, scouts, and other youth leaders so they're aware. These are the folks that know the families. They know about the struggles. Just get them to add this component to their work to protect the children. Next, please. Check out the strategic highway safety plan in your state and make sure that kids in cars with impaired drivers is on the agenda. Ensure that self-care, buckling up independently, is included in the education students' sessions for children. Check out the MAD website and see their program, Every Child Needs a Designated Driver. Your knowledge and concern can help protect the kids under the radar. Thank you. Next. And for further information, you can get in touch with us at 800-745-SAFE or go to carseat.org. You're also welcome to reach me at stombrello@carseat.org. I thank you so much for listening, and I hope that this will be helpful in your practice.